All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, there is a new report out from Vox and Data for Progress that gives us a window into how Americans feel about their billionaires. They asked respondents about billionaires in general, specific individual billionaires, and also some policy regarding billionaires. The results were actually really super interesting on any number of levels. One thing that is really clear is that the fallout from the financial collapse, decades of rising inequality, and a general sense that the economy is rigged for the 1% has definitely taken its toll on Americans' views of our plutocrat class. Feelings about the wealthiest among us are decidedly mixed and deeply skeptical, although there were some questions where billionaires still fared pretty well. Let's check in on the class war, shall we? First of all, Americans are overwhelmingly pissed off that billionaires gained massive riches during coronavirus. By a margin of 72 to 19, Americans felt that there was something unfair about billionaires getting rich during the pandemic. That included majorities of both Democrats and Republicans, although Republicans were less vociferous in their feelings about it. A full 63% of Dems strongly agreed that it was unfair versus only 37% of Republicans who said they strongly agreed. Independents more closely aligned with the Dems on their outrage. There was also basic agreement across partisan lines that billionaires should be allowed to exist. 82%, including broad majorities of both parties, felt that people should be allowed to become billionaires. Pluralities also disagreed that billionaires are a threat to democracy, so clearly not enough people are watching Rising, and I have a lot more work to do. But what I actually found most interesting were the partisan differences between Democrats and Republicans in terms of how they viewed billionaires. So, both parties have areas of deep skepticism and mistrust, but those feelings actually pop up in very different places. Overall, Republicans seem to hate specific billionaires and specific billionaire actions more, but in the abstract, they have more favorable views and are much less willing to do anything to curb billionaire wealth accumulation. Democrats are the polar opposite. They actually like specific billionaires like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos quite a bit, but they take a more skeptical and adversarial view in the abstract. So let me run down some of the data here. So they polled on favorability for 4 different billionaires: Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos. Overall, Elon Musk was the best liked and Mark Zuckerberg was the least liked. But among Democrats, all 4 billionaires received net favorable ratings. Republicans were very nearly the polar opposite. They gave all the men, save for one, Elon Musk, negative ratings. I would attribute these differences to the culture war. Zuckerberg, Bezos, and Gates have all been on the wrong side of conservative culture war issues. So while Republicans may not hate billionaires in general, they do hate these specific billionaires, and they hate them with a passion. By the way, Democrats really love them some Bill Gates. There was one other area where Republicans were more anti-billionaire than Democrats, and that was on the question of whether they had too much influence on the 2020 election. So majorities of both groups agreed they had too much influence, but a larger percentage of Republicans agreed with this statement at 62% versus Democrats at 55%. We covered here yesterday how dismayed Republican leaders and the Koch network were to find that Republican voters also want to get big money out of politics just as much as Democratic voters. I guess now you know why. Unsurprisingly, Republicans also were far more likely to say Joe Biden was too close to billionaires. So while Democrats had warm fuzzies about specific billionaires and are madly in love with Bill Gates, they dislike billionaires in the abstract. Pluralities thought that billionaires had done more bad than good during the pandemic, and a majority even thought that they do a bad job giving away their money. Democrats also overwhelmingly supported raising taxes on billionaires to solve the problems of the pandemic versus encouraging them to give more to philanthropy. That was a healthy margin of 68 to 24%. Republicans had exactly the reverse priorities. Only 36% wanted to raise billionaire taxes, while 50% said just encourage billionaires to give more to solve our problems. This all actually really helps to explain the curious attempts at populism that we've seen from both the Republicans and the Democrats. In both instances, their inconsistent approaches match the inconsistent views of their bases. Republicans love to go on Fox News and lament Facebook censorship or Amazon banning a book or doing some other woke thing that they don't like. But when it comes to actually advancing policy that would take power from these companies or from their billionaire founders, they're nowhere to be found. Democratic politicians are cozy with quite a lot of Silicon Valley titans and run in the same basic cultural circles. Just see Obama press secretary Jay Carney going to the mat right now as a paid propagandist for Amazon. But from a policy perspective, Democrats are more likely to at least take some steps towards curbing billionaire power, whether that's through campaign finance reform, increased taxes, and what has in recent years been rather lukewarm support for unions. Now, as we all know, all of these steps have been only marginal in nature, so it's not like the fortunes of their billionaire friends are really in danger. But they do take some incremental steps, while Republicans just take to the Newsmax airwaves. So, friends, that is your daily class war update. The populist viewers are in fact rising. The pro-billionaire propaganda about job creators and makers and takers, it's losing some of its luster, frankly. Maybe that's why even powerful corporate demigods like Bezos are feeling a little bit jittery these days, lashing out at Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. After all, they did agree to placate the masses with a few direct checks and some other ephemeral treats. They're all desperately adopting a populist aesthetic in order to convince the people that they are on their side. But slowly, the truth is taking hold, and even the eyes of the Fox News set are starting to open. Sagar, I thought these numbers were so interesting. You have both parties having a skeptical view of billionaires, but in very, very different ways. And it actually reminds me, there's this old sort of like adage that liberals like people in the abstract, or I guess don't like people in the abstract, and conservatives like or dislike people in specific measures. And it seems to sort of bear out with this data.
No, it's right. And this is actually why I've always tried to reframe the conversation around billionaires, because Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates are highly atypical of what the average billionaire is in America. You know how you become a billionaire? You get into hedge funds and you use arbitrage in order to game our financial markets.
Financial manipulation.
That's how you make $1 billion. Like, this is what people need to understand. I think we covered this way back in December or January. I need to go and check. But of the 17 new billionaires who were made in 2020, I think it was 12. The vast majority of them did so in the financial industry. That is how you become a billionaire. Now, I mean, maybe I'm more like the mean Republican here, like in terms of my view on this, which is that, like, I actually really like Elon Musk. I think he's really cool, and I think he's doing some cool stuff. I have less of an objection to a lot of the people who become billionaires in the Silicon Valley sense than the mean way that people become a billionaire in America today, which is basically financial arbitrage and gamification of unregulated or underregulated financial markets. So I wish people had a better understanding that the way that you basically become a billionaire is to like write this algorithm, which is like barely quasi-legal, which allows you to front run people's trades and become like a hedge fund magnate. The guys like Ken Griffin at Citadel and others, they add nothing to our life. I mean, look, Elon Musk's going to space. I think that's pretty cool. These guys literally just attacks on your and I's average trades. That's terrible. Those are the people I really want to go after. But we just don't talk that way in America, and we really should. About we really should ask, how do you become a billionaire in America? It's not by creating something of value. It hasn't been that way for a long time. Yeah, if you're, it actually, that's really interesting. Yeah. If you're framing the billionaire conversation around like specific billionaires and how you're feeling about it, it's really kind of irrelevant, right? That's really not the point, right? I may have specific feelings about Jeff Bezos, for example, or other billionaires, but that's really not the issue. I mean, look, you know, I'm sort of radical and I'm apparently in the vast minority of people who do think that it's immoral for society to allow billionaires. I don't think that anyone needs $1 billion. I think it's an absurd amount of money. And I think the fact that our policy has allowed such vast inequality to be created is actually a threat ultimately to our democracy, one of the greatest threats facing our democracy. But it's really interesting to see, too. I was thinking about, remember how Marco Rubio framed his argument for the Amazon workers around like, well, in this one instance, I think they should unionize because I don't like Amazon and I don't like Bezos and I don't like their woke HR corporate like department. Well, that actually is kind of in line with the way that Republicans appear to think about this, even though as we were looking at, we're like, this doesn't make any damn sense. You're going to pick and choose like which companies you like and which ones they don't. And actually a lot of Republicans, based on how they feel about it today, are like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm sort of imagining this extrapolating based on these results because I dislike these specific people. But in general, I think that the system we have is pretty good. But yes, in this one particular instance, it makes sense to me that they should be able to unionize. So I guess he was onto something with that case, although I thought it was, really, really tangled and confused and very, and created a strange thing where like, okay, now we're going to let our U.S. senators just like pick and choose which companies to regulate based on how they feel about these individual people. But I guess the other thing I would say is,
even though the views among voters in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are kind of inconsistent, this represents a dramatic change from the historic norm in the modern era of how the wealthy in our country have been portrayed, right? There is no longer this just like uncritical accepting of the elite class
like
as noble and better than and patriotic and great for the country and all this stuff. There is a lot more questioning. There's a lot more skepticism. There's a lot more sort of an adversarial relationship there. And it'll be interesting to see what that leads to over the years.
Well, I'm excited to see it, actually.
Coming up, Michael Starr Hopkins and Philip Wegman. They're going to join us for Team Rising. Stick with us.